I want to welcome everybody back to another episode of AML Detectives. And once again, I am just a lucky man and I have Mike Hearns back. Mike, great to see you again.
Justin, fantastic to be here. Thanks again for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. So there's one question that I wanted to ask you in the last episode and I forgot. And it's been bothering me every single night since. So my question is, talking about how criminal minds operate, I think it's important for folks in corporate environment to really understand. Can you shed some light, how do they infiltrate a bank? What do they do? How do they think? A million things I'm throwing at you, but I wanted to get your take on it.
Well, I give you kind of an analogy. You don't really ever hear musical songs written about a horse in a corral. You hear about a horse that broke out and ran away. You hear about the Rolling Stones saying wild horses. U2 sings, who's going to ride your wild horses. The criminals aren't bound by the same boundaries as corporate America. They don't have to adhere to the same rules. Therefore, their egress points, their ability to get in, their ability to pivot, their ability to change and adapt is faster than the corporate or the law enforcement environment. There is no send a memo up the chain of command and have the memo come back down again. There is no wait for Mr. So-and-so or Mrs. So-and-so to get back from vacation and see what he or she says. They're able to just move and groove, on with high speed. And because they're not bound by all the minutia, they're able to cut through all that and look for the crevices, the cracks to get into. And some of the crevices and cracks they look for are like there are certain communities and certain banks that lend themselves for an opportunity for a criminal to intersect with or to immerse themselves into. And if there's a bank that has a high turnover rate at the counter or the client level, where they don't get to know their customers, we all know. I'm going to ask you a question. What does KYC mean?
Yeah, I mean, listen.
What does it mean?
Yeah, know your client. Know
No,
your
it
customer.
means keep your cash.
Oh, I forgot about that one. You mentioned, yeah.
The money launderer has a whole different mindset.
Mm-hmm.
The money launderer thinks totally different from everybody else. He or she doesn't have to adhere by these rules, by these acronyms, by these things that are being put in front of them. There's no memos to sign. There's no stamps to be put on paper. So they're able to just get in and go.
Mm. So when you spoke about it, like criminals look for, I guess the type of financial institution they look for. You mentioned like high turnover. What other
High turnover, if you're like in a university or college environment where there's a lot of students and their parents are opening accounts and closing accounts every 8 or 9 months, there's a lot of turnover there. There's also like if you're near a large military base, a lot of those servicemen and women need to have bank accounts, and there's a lot of vendors and trade people that come through there. When you have a lot of quick accounts being opened and equally being closed because people are geographically moving, graduating from college, being deployed overseas, those type of things lend themselves to the money launderer. The money launderer also likes to be in a city that has decent seaports, decent airports, because there's a lot of high commerce coming through those areas as well. You can create shell corporations, you can create ancillary corporations.
Got it. So if we're looking like North America, really US, would you say like community banks, credit unions are better targets than the larger institutions?
No, I'm saying that it's more in line with geography and with hiring and firing practices within the bank. Sometimes a bank can be so big that it loses, track of what's going on in the basement.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes a bank can be so small that it has no idea what's going on its roof. So, it's where you find that egress point that you can get into, if that makes any sense.
It makes sense. Absolutely. So, all right. So you mentioned keep your cash, which we're going to refer to as, know your customer.
Yeah.
So, um, with the new customers coming aboard, like, what do you think, like, as far as red flags go? What do you think's the typical red flags that stand out during that whole onboarding phase that people should look out for?
Well, I think the biggest problem with the onboarding phase is that we ask for documents, we ask for papers.
Mm,
Papers can be manipulated, papers can be forged, papers can be deceptively created. I think what really needs to happen is more and more with the interview process,
mm.
the face-to-face process. When you ask people things and you talk to people about things, the way they answer you will give you a better idea about their truthfulness than rather than what they wrote on a piece of paper.
Well, that's all your investigative techniques that you learned throughout the years about looking at facial reactions, body language, sweating, all that.
Well, yeah, there's also ways you talk to people too. I
Mm,
mean, most people are either tactile, touch, audio, hearing, or visual, sight. So when you learn what someone says, you can say something like, Justin, you see what I'm telling you, right?
mm,
Justin, you hear what I'm trying to tell you, right?
mm.
Justin, you can feel what I'm trying to get across to you. So once you figure out what someone is, whether it's their audio or their visual or their tactile, you talk to them in that language and then you see how they respond.
So you think it's harder these days with the advent of really the digital age as opposed to, people going into a branch, opening an account? Is it different now?
It's not so much that it's different. It's just that, the digital age still goes through a vetting process.
Mm,
Want to come up with a new biometric system to authenticate who's who in front of you. That
mm.
still goes through 16 different vendors, present their product to you. It goes in front of a board. The board decides what they're going to use. Then it gets, in municipal government, it would become a resolution when it goes to city commission. City commission has to approve on it. And that becomes like a 13, 14-month process. And
Right.
some of this technology changes so fast that by the time you approve what you're doing, there's already a countermeasure out there already, or there's already a different measure out there already. Well, the criminal doesn't have to go through all that, through all those hoops, and that there is no resolution in front of the city commission. There is no elevator pitch. There is none of that in the criminal world. So they're able to adapt and create and modify technology to help them, whereas you're trying to stay within the frame and lane. They're basically drawn outside the frame and outside the lane.
Got it. Oh, that sounds good. So question. All right. So say I'm going to give you a hypothetical now. Customer gets in, they're a client now. Now we go to the monitoring phase, right? Look in their accounts, make sure there's nothing, no issues that arise during the relationship. So if I were a criminal, and obviously I'm not, once I get onboarded, regardless if the documents are forged or not, I'm on. Do criminals leave the account dormant for a period of time? I'm trying to think like how does a criminal mind operate after they get onboarded successfully?
Well, I mean, there's a multiple um, there's multiple answers to that question. One answer could be they just want to get in, park themselves, and come across as a long established customer rather than as anything that's flashy or going to catch someone's eye. The other thing is that there could be a sense of urgency. They
Hmm.
could know that once again we had discussed in another segment that we did weeks ago. We discussed um, which being geopolitical. They
Right.
can know there's going to be a Russian invasion into the Ukraine. They can know that maybe China's amassing a fleet off of Taiwan, and there's an urgency now. So you're going to see that account explode very quickly. There could also be a problem going on as far as in the southern borders, where there are warring factions of criminal transnational groups. And once again, there's a sense of urgency. So, his or her machinations and what they're going to do once they're in your banking system is pretty much at the whim of what's going on in their life.
Right. That's interesting. So, all right, I got a question for you, and I always have to bring up cryptocurrency, right? To me, money laundering's safe haven. How has it changed from a criminal perspective using crypto now as opposed to the old traditional banking system?
Crypto's a tricky question. And it's tricky because cryptocurrency is not one type of currency. Like
Right.
we have the United States dollar, which is revered around the world. There are more $100 bills outside of the United States than there are inside the United States.
Mm,
United States, we have I think we have something like 14 Federal Reserves, but truthfully speaking, the actual printing of money is only done in 2 places in the United States. So that currency is revered around the world, recognized around the world. If I held a $100 bill up in front of a classroom in any part of the world, somebody would recognize what that currency is. But if I held a $100 bill from the Bahamas or from Colombia, a peso, a bolivar, whatever it may be, someone may not recognize it. So you're able to create, obviously, the first cryptocurrency is Bitcoin.
Mm.
And from Bitcoin, you started having different types of NFTs and cryptocurrencies. The issue of cryptocurrency that people don't seem to understand is that the value of the cryptocurrency is higher than anything you can purchase. What I mean by that is this: you could take $60,000 worth of cryptocurrency and buy yourself a Hyundai Genesis fully loaded.
Mm.
But the second you drive that car off the parking lot of the dealership, it devalues.
Yeah.
Whereas that 60,000 goes up the next day to become worth 62,000.
Mm.
So the person who possesses the cryptocurrency is actually hoarding the cryptocurrency because the valuation of it rises faster than any product you could buy. So what happens is you have cryptocurrency and I have cryptocurrency. You're not spending it, I'm not spending it. It becomes a closed economy, and we like to pat each other on the back and tell each other how great we are. The reality of it is we're not doing anything with it. And if it doesn't get out into the world and doesn't expand, and the expansion of monetary instruments is what causes an economy to grow, then it's great that we can sit around and say, hey, you got crypto, I got crypto. But there's nothing in any of our backgrounds here that's worth spending cryptocurrency on, because whatever that credenza is worth, it's not going to be worth that much tomorrow compared to what the valuation is. So when people think about criminals, dumping money into cryptocurrency, that's a long game.
Mm.
This is not a world for long game people. Money launderers don't oftentimes last, 40 years doing this. Meyer Lansky was more of a consultant than a money launderer. He
Mm.
really was. He was more of a financial consultant. He really wasn't. Yeah, maybe in the early 50s, he was moving some money to some Cuban casinos, but by the 1960s, while he was getting the Miami Herald on Alton Road in Miami Beach, he was not, moving a lot of money. So this is a get in and get out kind of game, and cryptocurrency is more of a long game because no one's spending it.
Yeah. I agree. I'm going through the ups and downs. There was a commercial that I saw on TV. It was just really funny. Gentleman stands up from his desk at work. He's like, I'm a millionaire. 5 minutes later, it cuts in, I'm broke. 5 minutes later, I'm a millionaire. That commercial always sticks in my mind when you think of the nature of crypto and the volatility these days. So it's an interesting investment these days.
Yeah. And the part of that commercial that you're not highlighting is what it does to the parasympathetic system of the body.
Yeah.
I had a friend, he passed away, and I loved him dearly.
Mm.
As a self-made multi-millionaire to the New York Stock Exchange. And he would literally lose or win. I won't say win. He would earn or lose 3 or 4 million before lunch every day. And that up and down swing, you got to have a cast iron stomach to live in that world. You really do.
Mm-hmm. I not my cup of tea.
No, and he was good at it. He didn't care. He would, he didn't. One time I was sitting next to him, and he looked at me, and he held his phone up. And he said to me, and at the time he was a large investor in IMAX.
Mm.
IMAX.
Mm.
It's up such and such. And I was like, okay, I don't know. He had a couple of buttons on his phone, and
Mm.
he put his phone back. And then about 20 minutes later, he got a bing, and he went, oh. I go, what happened? He goes, oh, I just made $420,000. And I was like, with my phone, like, hijack that signal somewhere, But that's the mindset he had. It's actually what happens is it becomes it becomes not even a commodity. It becomes just a product.
Mm.
And we had mentioned once before about valuations and value equations. if you don't value the chair you're sitting in, then you're going to mistreat it. If you
Yes.
don't value, so not that he mistreated anything, it's just that he didn't have the same value equation. It didn't represent to him what it represents to most other people. And then it's the same thing with the money launderer. The money launderer is just, he recognizes that he's part of the transport system. He's part of the conveyor belt.
Yeah.
And he recognizes that there will be some things left on the conveyor belt for him, but the majority of stuff gets shipped out on the truck somewhere else. He's just part of the machinery. And once you come to when we used to seize currency, the first time we seized money, you're looking at all this currency on the table, and you're looking at a stack of bills that's like this thick.
Mm.
You're recognizing that it's all in hundreds, and you're saying that's my mortgage, my entire mortgage. But after a while, when you recognize it's like counting rocks, it doesn't
Yeah.
belong to you.
That is interesting. And talk about mindset. So it's going to segue to my next question. So all those years of going undercover, like, what were I guess the lessons learned that you took away from that experience? I know it was a long time, but what comes to mind, like the biggest lessons learned?
I think the biggest lessons learned are the things that you learned as a younger person hold true.
Mm-hmm.
Really are seven evils, sloth, greed.
Mm-hmm.
There really are a lot. There's a lot of truth in the parables and the things you learned as a young child, because you see it comes out.
Mm-hmm.
It comes out in things. Every year I was undercover, somebody I worked with either killed themselves or they went to jail.
Mm-hmm.
It's money laundering is not for the faint of heart.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, people die across this world for a lot less money than what we were carrying in suitcases on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm.
And when you understand that, you recognize that it's not like Hollywood portrays a bespectacled 150-pound guy, with a calculator. That's not what these people look like. They come in different genders and skin tones and backgrounds, and there's a ruthlessness to it,
Mm-hmm.
and it's you have to be, I won't say equally ruthless, but you also have to be hardened to exist in that world.
Wow. I couldn't even imagine. Actually, I probably don't want to really imagine.
Well, it's the end game. It's the end
Yeah.
result. It's all the processing of, let's take cocaine for example. All the processing of coca, all the transportation, all the bribery, all the sales. Now the money is here, and now you intercept it as a detective. You,
Mm-hmm.
you just negated everything.
Yeah. This is awesome. I love having you on. I definitely want to have you on again.
Anytime, man. We'll do it anytime.
Oh, you're the best. Well, listen, Mike, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on again. And for those out there, I mean, there's a lot of lessons learned we could take away from this conversation. And to me, the most interesting is just really learning how criminal minds operate, what they go through, how they infiltrate a financial institution. There's so many of them. So I definitely recommend replaying this episode about 100 times, because there's a lot of valuable information you could take away from Mr. Mike Hearns. Thank you again, Mike.
Good to see you again.